Well, there you go. That was dramatic. um, do you like these sort of things? Do you like personality profiles? Who likes personality tests? I don't mean like the silly ones like what Hogwarts house would you be in, or what cheese are you, or something like that. I mean like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram. Who's a big fan of those sort of things? A few people. I love personality tests. I love just finding out a little bit more about who I am and why I do the things that I do. I'm an ENTJ when it comes to Myers-Briggs, if you understand any of what that means. And you might not, but for me, it helps me think, oh, okay, this is why I do this, and this is why I'm wired in that way. And I find them helpful to help me understand myself a little bit better, but I also find them helpful to help me understand other people and how other people, people do things differently to the way I do them. It's the other way, that's described as doing it wrong, obviously, because I do things the correct way and the right way. But I've noticed sometimes people do things in a slightly different way. And I have to well, why would you do that? Makes no sense at all. Obviously, my way is the right way. But people do this, and we do this. Now, Jamie, our youth worker, Jamie was in the band this morning. He hates personality profiles. He says he's far more complex than a personality assessment tool and those sort of things. And Jamie would say things like, you shouldn't put people in boxes and all of those sort of things. And don't tell him this, but he is correct to a certain extent, because the danger of these sort of things is that we can sort of use them as a box to describe or to define who somebody is. They're always like this, or they always behave in this way, and we can put them in a box. And we shouldn't put people in boxes as much as we might want to at some point. And there's been a few times when I've wanted to put Jamie in a box, but again, don't tell him that at all. The danger is when we start thinking about somebody, whether it's a personality profile or something else about them, and we use that to define them. We say, well, they're always like this, or this is exactly how they are. They become like straitjackets that are actually can be a bit difficult and can get in the way of many things. Let me give you an example of this. This is with permission from Jamie. So we did a thing as a book by a guy called Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player. And Patrick talks about these three characteristics that the ideal team player has. So first of all, they're humble. That means that, it's not all about them. They're willing to recognize their place in the scheme of things and help others and serve others and be outward looking and all those sort of things. They're hungry. That means that they're willing to work hard, that actually they want to perform well, they want to give of their best, and they want to help the team achieve their best. And they're smart. That means they have emotional intelligence. They're aware of who they are, and they're aware of the actions that they have and how that impacts the other people around them. And, the best team players, the ideal person to have in a team is somebody who has humility, who's hungry, who has that passion and that drive, and who is smart, who has that emotional intelligence. And towards the back of the book, Patrick goes through, he describes a bunch of people who maybe have, two of these things and not one of the other. And so he describes people who are humble and smart but not hungry. And that's Jamie. When we've gone through the assessment on all those sort of stuff and talked about those things, Jamie will say, well, yeah, I have humility. Yeah, I've got emotional intelligence, but I might not be as driven as other people. And the phrase or the picture that Patrick uses to describe people who are humble and smart but not hungry is the lovable slacker. And when we saw this, we laughed about it because we're like, yeah, Jamie, you are the lovable slacker. And he laughed and we all laughed and all of those sort of things. And the problem with that, it's funny and it helps us understand a little bit of why Jamie does what he does, and some of those sort of things helps him understand that. But it can be so easy for me to always see Jamie as a lovable slacker, to always see him as somebody, who has that humility, who has that emotional intelligence, but will never actually have any drive or motivation or passion to actually, work hard and all those sort of things. And that isn't Jamie at all. By looking at that stuff, actually I can restrict him and define him and put him in a box. But also, it could be easy for Jamie to think of himself in that way, to think, well, I'm just a lovable slacker, so I will just just play to the things that I can do, and I won't bother with that drive or that motivation or that passion. And the problem is that when we start to do that's the very thing that I'm talking about, that we begin to see people or define people or restrict people into this mold of being because of whatever it is, because of something we know about them. And I wonder, do you ever do this? I don't mean like in a team setting, but are there people in your life or people you come into contact with that you have defined because of something about them? Maybe there's something you see. When you see them, there's something that you see that it almost comes around the corner before them. It could be a disability, it could be an attitude, it could be a characteristic, it could be a past experience. Whatever it is, there's something about this person that you can't see beyond this thing, and you've used that to define them. You've used that to shape them. You've used that to mold them. You've used that to sort of put them in a box. Do you do this? Is there people in your life that happens for when you think about them? Maybe that's you. Maybe people do that for you. When I was growing up, I was a twin, and in a certain extent, being a twin defined or shaped a little bit of who I am. I'd be associated with my brother, and people would call us the twins, and if he did something wrong, I'd get in trouble for it, and if he did something right, he never did anything right, so I never got the credit for those sort of things. And it felt a little bit that I was restricted by being this twin, and when people would see me, it felt a little bit that I was half a person because, I'm one of the twins and all those sort of things. There's a thing, we can do this quite easily when, we just see something and we define people and we restrict people because of what's going on in their lives or those sort of things. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about somebody who knows exactly what that's like, who's experienced that. And through the readings we've had, we've already come into contact with her. It's a lady called Mary Magdalene. She's got her own film out. I didn't know that. So there you go. That's actual real life footage of Mary Magdalene. And, we don't know a lot about Mary other than, there's a load of Marys that appear in the Bible because Mary was a very common name back then. And, this isn't Mary, the mother of Jesus. This is this lady called Mary Magdalene, or she's from a place called Magdalene. That's why she's got that name. And she sort of was somebody who was close to Jesus and was impacted by Jesus. This is the first time we come across Mary in the Gospel. So Luke is recording this for us. And he says this, after this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who'd been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. This is the first time we come into contact with Mary Magdalene. And, the first thing we hear about her is that she was a lady who Jesus had driven out 7 demons. And Luke doesn't give us much information about this. And, I've got a bunch of questions here. What's going on here? What's that all about? And it sparks loads of stuff going on in my mind. And I suppose a little bit we can miss the point of this. But we don't know what this means. We don't know what they were. We don't know much about that. But what we could assume is that, this lady, Mary, was defined by what was going on inside her, by these 7 demons. Whatever that means would have in some way sort of shaped her and restricted her. I imagine people, when they saw Mary, they would see this. There would have been something that would have displayed through the way that she lived and interacted and the way that she acted. And people would have sort of saw this part of her whenever they saw her. But the point that Luke's making is that Jesus met with Mary and he healed her from this, that Jesus set her free from all of this sort of stuff and all of this baggage that she was carrying around with her. But you can imagine, if you were there at the time and if you had met Mary, maybe before this moment, you would have seen this coming before you saw Mary coming. You would have defined her by that. You would have put her in a box by that. And actually, years after her death, excuse me, this silly cough just really gets in the way. Years after her death, we were still doing it. If you read any Dan Brown novels, Dan likes to paint this picture that Mary Magdalene had a romantic relationship with Jesus and they got married and all this sort of stuff, which is based on nothing at all. Actually, some people in the movement of the church thought that Mary was a prostitute or a sex worker, and that's recently been proved to not being the case. But there's a whole bunch of stuff because of these two words, 7 demons that she had in her, that people, when she was alive, used it to define her and shape her, and people long after she died use it to define her and describe her and paint the picture of who she is. But she met Jesus, and Jesus set her free from that. Jesus healed her from that. And so she traveled about with Jesus. Wherever Jesus went, Mary went, and so did a bunch of other people. And the next time we come across Mary is here. John's recording this for us, and it's during the crucifixion of Jesus. And it says this: near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Now, we think all of these people are called Mary, so it's a bit confusing. But Mary Magdalene was one of the people there, standing near the cross of Jesus. As Jesus was being crucified, Mary and the other Marys were there nearby watching on. Now, the apostles, the 12 followers of Jesus, or 11 at this point because Judas had abandoned them, were in hiding. They were in a room, in a house somewhere, because they were terrified that what was going to happen to Jesus was going to happen to them as well. So they're not there. They've totally deserted Jesus. But Mary Magdalene follows nearby because, well, she has been so impacted by who Jesus is and what Jesus has done, that she wants to be here. She wants to be close to him, even at the end. But as we know, this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. So, we read on. We're going to stay in John's version of events. And it says this: early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. So Jesus was crucified on the Friday, and they took his body down off the cross. And a guy called Joseph basically bribed Pontius Pilate for the body so that he could bury it properly. So they did that on the Friday. The Saturday was the Jewish Sabbath. It was also the festival of Passover. And there's a bunch of restrictions about what you can and can't do on that day. So they buried Jesus' body on the Friday night. And early on the first day of the week, so this is Sunday, that was the first day of their week, the first point when Mary could get up and go to be close to Jesus, she gets up and she goes to be close with Jesus. And John tells us, while it was still dark. And I think this darkness is both metaphorical and literal. Yeah, it's before dawn, and the darkness is always darker before dawn. But, the darkness that Mary is feeling right now must have been so restrictive and so oppressive. Jesus had set her free. Jesus had transformed her life. She thought that she'd find the one who was going to restore Israel and all of those things that they hoped the Messiah was going to do. And now he's dead. Now he's in a tomb. And Mary doesn't know what to do. But the first moment she gets up and she makes her way to the tomb. And as we room on, and it says this, and she saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." So, can you picture the scene? Mary is on her way to the tomb, and actually what she's going to do is she's going to prepare Jesus' body for burial. Somehow she's going to get into the tomb, and she's going to unwrap the body that's been wrapped heavily in all these bandages and spices, and she's going to redo it. And this doesn't make much sense because, Joseph has already done this. Joseph of Arimathea has done this with somebody else, that these two guys have already prepared Jesus' body for burial. Yet Mary is going to go and do this again. Why would she do that? Well, partly because you can't trust a man to do a job properly. I think that's the thing. But such is her devotion to Jesus that she loves him so much that she's willing to go into a tomb where his body has been. It's the third day since he's been brutally murdered. And she's going to unwrap that body and rewrap it. Such love, such devotion that she shows to Jesus. And she gets there, and the stone is gone, and she doesn't know what happened. So she legs it back, and she finds where the disciples are, the apostles are. And she says to them, "Look, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb. I don't know where they've put him. So Peter, and we think it's John, runs back to the tomb, and they find it as Mary has described. And they go in, and Jesus isn't there, and then they go back to the house. And they're not sure what has happened, but Mary stays nearby. It says this, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb." She is absolutely broken by what is going on. And, she doesn't know what to do. So she just stays there by the tomb weeping. And as she looks in, she sees this strange sight. She saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and one at the foot. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." See, Mary is convinced of two things at this point. She's convinced that Jesus is dead, and she's convinced that somebody has taken his body. That's the same thing that everybody was convinced at this point. Jesus is dead, and they've taken his body. And, so she's like, I don't know what to do. And she's staying there, where have they put him? And the angel said this, At this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who's it you're looking for?" I love the way he says this. I mean, of course, Jesus knows who she's looking for, but he has this sort of interaction with her. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I'll get him." See, she is utterly broken, and Jesus is standing right next to her, and he said, "Why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" And she can't see him, she can't recognize him. Now, I don't know why she can't recognize him. A bit later on in this series that we're starting this morning called Alive, we're going to talk about another encounter where people met the risen Jesus and they didn't recognize him because his likeness was held or withheld from them. I'm not sure if that's going on here. I think the reason why Mary didn't realize that it was Jesus is because she is so broken and she is so convinced that Jesus is dead and somebody has taken the body, that even with Jesus standing there right by her side, she still can't see him. And the pleading, she's like, "If you've taken him away, just please tell me where you've put him so I could go and bring him back and give him the respect and the burial that he deserves." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And I just love the intimacy of this encounter. It's just Jesus and it's just Mary. It's early on. The day is just starting. When she set out, it was dark, and that darkness was oppressive. That darkness was encircling her. She could feel it in the depths of her being, the depths of her soul. Maybe it took her back to that time before Jesus had healed her, and it felt like she'd felt that there was hope and there was possibility, but that all gone, and that darkness was there, and she felt it so strongly as the tomb was empty, and she couldn't find the body, and she didn't understand what was going on, and she meets the gardener, and Jesus just says, "Mary." That's all it takes. He looks her in the eye and calls her by name. And that's enough for her, that she recognizes who he is. And she cries out in this loud voice, "Rabboni," teacher. She understands. And Jesus is filled with compassion for her in this moment. He could see what she was going through. He could see and perhaps feel the darkness that was encircling her. And he reaches out to her. He just looks her in the eye and he says, "Mary." And just that one word is enough to drive out and dispel the power of darkness. And I wonder, can you associate with Mary at all? Yeah, of course, you're not been in this situation or all these circumstances, but what Mary's feeling and what Mary's going through, can you imagine what it must have been like to have been Mary at this moment? Do you ever feel the darkness circling around you? Do you ever feel the darkness closing in on you, the oppression and the restriction of that? Does it ever get in the way of you? Does it ever cling to you? Does it ever sort of define you or shape you or describe you or make you feel or act in a certain way? We go through those moments of life where we feel just like this. We feel broken. We feel lost. We feel unsure of what to do. And I think Jesus does the same thing for us in those moments as he did for Mary. That Jesus walked up to her and he looked her in the eye and he called her by name. And I think he does the same for each and every one of us. That when we find ourselves in those dark and difficult places, he will look us in the eye and he will call us by name. And give us hope and restore us. And we read on, Jesus says, don't hold on to me, for I've not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. Suddenly, everything has changed. She was convinced that Jesus was dead. She was convinced that they'd hidden the body or stolen the body. And now she's standing face to face with her risen Lord and Savior. And she realizes who Jesus truly is, that he truly is the Messiah, that he truly is the Son of God, that he's God himself. And Jesus says, don't hold on for me. There's still much to do. And I want you to go. I want you to go to my brothers, and I want you to tell them what you've seen. I want you to testify. I want you to be a witness to this. This is the first time that the risen Jesus has appeared to somebody, and Mary is the person that he chooses to appear to. What an honor. And he says, he sends her off to go and share this message. Mary is the first person to proclaim that Jesus, the good news of the resurrection of Jesus. And the amazing thing is, in this culture, Mary's a woman, and the testimony of a woman isn't valid. It's not viewed to be trustworthy. And so, I love the way that Jesus chooses to reveal himself, to appear at first to a woman, that he turns that culture on its head. I mean, for me, that's another thing that says, if you were making this up, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't have Jesus appearing to a woman, because it just undermines the credibility of the story. But Jesus, time and time again, pushes back against those sort of cultural things that are going on, and he elevates Mary, and he gives her this new status, this new mission and this new purpose to go out and tell people about who I am. Years and years later, centuries later, Thomas Aquinas, this theologian, described Mary as an apostle to the apostles. That word apostle just means someone who is sent. And Jesus sent her to the other apostles to tell them, that I've arisen, that I'm back on the scene. And I just love this whole encounter, because Mary's life has been totally and completely transformed again. It happened when Jesus healed her the first time, and those demons were restricting her and defining her and shaping her and describing her. And again, when she thought all was lost and all was over, Jesus comes and stands before her and looks her in the eye. And as she turns and truly sees who he is, she starts to realize who she really is. And Jesus gives her new purpose, new identity, new meaning. What an amazing, wonderful story. But what about you? Where are you in all of this? Let's just get the band back up on stage as we bring this to a close. What an amazing encounter. But where does your story overlap with Mary? Of course, there's so many things that are going on here that we can't understand, that we can't associate with because we're not there. But where are you held captive to the darkness of your past? Where do you allow the labels that other people perhaps might put upon you to shape you and to define you? Where do you allow the assumptions that other people have about you to just restrict you and define you and to put you in a box? I believe that Jesus stands before you just as he did before Mary. And whatever it is that's going on in you, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing, whatever is restricting you and defining you and containing you, I believe that Jesus stands before you and he looks you in the eye and he calls you by name. And if you're able to see who he truly is, he will help you to see who you truly are. And sure, that might not change things for other people. Just like for Mary, it took generations for people to finally really understand who she really was. People still put those labels and those definitions on her. But hey, it doesn't really matter what other people think. What do you think? Are you able to see yourself the way that Jesus sees you? That's what the Easter story is all about. That through the death and the resurrection of Jesus, he's able to offer us life. But not just ordinary life, abundant life, overflowing life.